29 in your books. Page 29. We've had some good teaching, haven't we, with Brother Cook and Brother Snyder, bishops, that they get into it. They pull from their experience and they share with us, and I appreciate them making the time to be here. And I know their schedules are just packed. They are packed. And but they made time to be here because they think it's important. And I'm glad you think it's important enough to be here also. So lesson number 5, we're going to be talking about how church size impacts the ministry. And I think this is very, very relevant for us and what's going on here. And a lot of it's a mindset. Because we have been trained, we have been taught since we were just young kids that numbers matter. Bigger's better, and all this good stuff. But different sized churches, as we look at it, it doesn't matter what size you are. You need an organization and administration that functions for the size of your church. Is your church going to function the same way as a church down the street, as a church in Olathe, as a church here? Absolutely not. There are different needs. There are different types of organizational plans that need to be in place, and there's different types of administrations that need to be in place in your church. And so we're going to try to talk you through some of these things. And as we get to talking, just remember that God loves a church of all sizes. He does not have a preference. Like, well, as soon as they hit 70, I'll start blessing them. I'll give them some inspiration. That's not the way God is. God looks on your heart and He wants to do it. So our purpose this morning, in this particular session or this afternoon, is that we want to help you understand that churches of different sizes behave so that when you begin to grow, that your behavior changes with the size of your church. Because if you try to run a church that you have run for years at 10 or 15, and all of a sudden we're up at 70 or 80, you're going to have some problems. That you're going to find out that you're going to be doing all the work if you do that. That's not what we want. We want you to be able to grow and expand as the church grows and expands. We're going to be talking about the Joseph principle. Does anybody remember what that one was? That was where attending an organization matters, where Joseph planned, and he just didn't throw something together. He was thoughtful about it. He was looking at his audience, looking at what was going on, looking at how much time that he had. So everything, and I think Joe and Bill brought it out good, it has to be on a timeline. We have to have a time. And I'm one of those guys that I have a to-do list at home that sometimes I put things on it. Mostly Cindy puts things on it. But if I just leave it out there as to, this is my to-do list, a lot of it doesn't get done. But then when I start breaking it down, this is what I need to do today, this is what I need to do tomorrow, this is what I need to get done by the end of the week, things get done. And when we begin to plan the organizational structure and the administrative structure, we need to have it in a framework. Because if we just let it float, it's not going to be helping us any. Different sized churches operate in different ways. It's something that it's good to go out and to look at these churches and to see how they operate, but you're going to have to use it and mold it to fit your congregation and your church. And you're going to have to help your pastor. It's been mentioned several times. You're going to have to help your pastor understand what's working and what's not. Because a lot of times from the leader's perspective, everything is just awesome. We're doing a great job. The plan's in place. But down at the worker bee level, it's going like, this ain't working. We got to figure something out. That communication has to be there to be able to talk to them. Here's an example in Genesis 37 that Israel had 12 sons. They were able to do about anything they wanted to because there's only 12 people there. They got together. They decided Joseph had to go. So they took care of him. And so the 12 can do about anything they bring their minds together to do. But by the time Genesis 46 rolls around, those sons had wives, and it won't say anything about that, and children. And so that the group became about 70 now, to where that it operates as an extended family. And that would be, the family, they know everything that's going on, they know people, and they work having the brothers and then the wives and the children kind of as a family together, the 12 brothers being the nuclear family. Now they lived in each separate rooms and had separate properties and separate responsibilities, but within that extended family they were still a group. They still kind of knew one another, knew what was going on. But by the time the Exodus 18 comes along, Israel had grown so large that they needed an organizational system to come up. And Moses' father Jethro said, "Dude, you're going to kill yourself. Here's what you need to do." And so he broke it down into tribes and had them stand under their banners and work that way with them. So it was easier to maintain kind of the structure and the organization and get the word out. And when we get to the point to where that we have that organizational structure to where we're like Jethro, we need to start moving and appointing, which I believe that no matter what size we are, we need to start that at least for the training purpose, if nothing else, to be able to have people trained that when we get bigger, then when we grow, we will have people ready to step in that position and not wait until we hit that 50 mark or 60 mark or 70 mark. We have people in the wings, ready to go, trained up, knowing what's going on, with the vision and purpose already set in their heart to move forward and to take on these responsibilities. And so one thing is that when we do select these people, they need to be capable. Because in Exodus 18:21 it says, "Select capable men from all the people and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people." So they broke it down to that pretty good numbers. And in Numbers 2, God asked another layer. He kind of puts in another layer for us. As the people traveled and camped, they were related as tribes. So they had another thing in there. They identify as camps within those tribes. And so there is a structure that God has placed out there, that God loves organization. God works through organization. And many times, and it's been said here this morning before, that they think it's holy, they think it is spiritual when we don't have plans to give the Holy Ghost, give the Spirit more room, more freedom to move. But then it's really not. We have to have a structure for the Spirit to move in, for people to follow when the Spirit moves, and it does not help us, and it really hinders us when we do not have a plan to follow and to lead the people through. And so the Israelites in Numbers 2:2-7, it says the Israelites are to camp about the tent of meeting, each under his standard with the banners of his family. So they are supposed to have this organization and camp under their banners. The second point here is the larger the group, the more complex it becomes. And that's the way it talks about in the children of Israel here, that it was okay when they had 12, even maybe when they had 70. But when they got up to where there were generations of people there, it became pretty complex, because you're dealing with a lot of different generations, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different inputs. And like I said, a lot of people think their idea is pretty good and they want you to follow what they have to say. So it becomes a lot more complex when you have a lot more people putting in to the system that we've got going. And here's the rule of 70, that the average person will relate to 70 others, no matter the size of the church. Now, this is one of those that they have done studies on, that DCPI has looked at and done some studies on, that, as mentioned above, that with 70 members, that the children of Israel could operate as an extended family. They still had contact and knew kind of closely what was going on with what was happening here. A few years ago, the researchers attended church and they asked the people, okay, how many people do you roughly know? How many people that not just know of them, but you have a fairly decent contact with? And no matter whether the church was 100, 200, 1,000, 100,000, the answer was pretty consistent at 70. they could identify closely with 70 people. And that seems to be the kind of contact point, the area of influence. Now, this doesn't mean that the pastors get away on these bigger churches like, if I know 70 people, I'm good. You need to know names. And that is something, I took Dale Carnegie, and that is the sweetest name anybody, or sweetest thing anybody knows is their own name. So, and I have a terrible time at this, but try to remember people's names, and when you see them again, remember that, especially visitors, that they appreciate when you call them by name instead of just saying, hey, it's so glad to see you again. And I'll admit, I have trouble with that, and I'm having to work on that quite a bit. But 70 is approximate size of the extended family. And so I got to thinking about this, and my dad was one of 11 sons, 11 kids in there. And so we kind of got separated and sorted through, but we started coming back here, and they had family reunions. And so the 11 kids got together, and then they brought their families back together, and that wasn't too bad. I mean, it was a lot of people there. But then as the families began to grow, that we lost contact as close as that we had when it was just 50 of us or 40 of us or 70 of us. And as it grew, we lost contact. We didn't even know who some of these other family members were. And people introduced them like, this is your cousin. Like, okay, I don't know him. Never met him. But okay, I believe you on this. So 70 is the approximate size of the family. The rule of 70 tells us when a church reaches the extended family size, things must change. That 70 level is kind of I'll relate it to that book we're going to get ready to talk about the tipping point. That action goes up to a certain point and then something happens. Something extends out beyond that. Now, instead of being one large extended family, it becomes a group of extended families. And that's the way it was with our family meetings, that there would be kind of the Newsons here and the Fullers here, and the different families kind of started gathering together because the commonality, and they associated more and they knew them better. So it is something that the body, the group, starts to function differently at about 70. Number 2 is addition versus multiplication. Churches grow by addition, but the most effective way is by multiplication. And this is interesting here because I think we have all faced this at one point. A new church can add members to its extended family by welcoming them in a group. If your church is about 70, like we're talking here, somebody comes in, they're pretty well accepted, and we remembered, and they're talked to, and it's not hard to assimilate them into a group if we really want to try and get them part of the group. Okay, but then as the church grows, the relations connections get filled. So if your church is big and you already have 70 connections that you make, it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to keep adding people to that, just because of the psychological standpoint that we have in our brains and the way that we function. So once that gets filled, now it's hard for an individual to come in and just kind of walk in off the streets and be accepted and be assimilated into what we have. Having more groups open up more potential to relational connections. So as we grow, we need to begin to form bigger groups or different groups. That contact point will open up more receptions to where that as the people come in, we have the ability to accept them in. We have the room for them to be assimilated into and works them and grows them. To grow a church rapidly, you must multiply its number by groups and serving teams. That's why the groups and teams are so important, that when people come in, they are looking for associations. They are looking for belonging. They are looking for being a part, engaged, involved in. And if we just kind of stand back and say, boy, we're sure glad you're here, and let them go through it, then more than likely we're going to lose them. But we need to grow the church so that we can multiply our numbers because we have the teams in place to be able to establish that relationship. Number 3 is invitation versus walk-ins. Once the church reaches above 70 new members, we reach that kind of saturation point in our relationship side, and making friends is tough. So in order to become part of the church larger than 70, a newcomer has to become associated with one of these groups. That's why these individual ministries are so critical in medium to bigger churches. When we have a smaller church, we welcome them in and work it well. But when we get to be a certain size, that they have to become part of that group if they're going to come back. They have to feel like they belong. These groups within the church are where new relationships develop and how newcomers become a part of the members. And anyone can come into a church public meeting. We can walk into any church door at any time we want to. On any Sunday, we can walk into a church and people will shake our hands, welcome us in. But to become a part of a group, you've got to be invited. We have to feel like we are welcomed and invited into that group and feel appreciated, to feel noticed, and to feel assimilated into that group. And so the groups within the church are where new relationships develop, and that's why it's important to do the invitation. Assimilation to a church of 70 plus members is by invitation only. So that's why it's important that if we want people to come in, we work so hard to get them. And if you talk to these different companies that are out there, they put out stats of how much it takes to get a new customer in business. And it is very, very expensive to have advertisement, to have people come in and put that in front of you, put your name in front of them, have them come in the door, to have your employees treat them to where they don't want to come back again. And that's the same way it is with the church, is that they have to require an invitation to be part of a group. And so someone in these groups has to invite the newcomer to be a part of their circle, part of their group. There has to be a connection made for them to come back that second time, that third time, that fourth time. And it is not written in stone what that has to be. It could be just a morning coffee that makes them feel like this is the place they need to be. Think outside the box on this. Every new visitor should be invited into a fellowship group of some kind. Whether it's just having coffee with somebody, whether it's just spending a little bit of time with them after church, before church, whatever it is, we need to establish and put out that invitation to the people. At 70, greeters are essential and an introducer is helpful. What in the world are you talking about? I thought the same thing when I started reading this, and when I was sitting in your seat, like, what is going on here? And so small churches can be informal when it comes to introductions, because everyone is a part of the extended family. Everybody is part of that initial nucleus. Family members all greet each other, and new people are conspicuous. We know who the new folks are when they come to our church. And it's not critical to have greeters at the door. And as a formal greeter, everybody in a church should be a greeter. Everybody should be that one saying, man, I'm so glad you're here. We're glad you come through the door. Welcome in. What can we do for you? Have a seat here by me. Let's do something. Everybody should be a greeter. But when it gets above 70, newcomers need an introduction. They need somebody to talk to. Stationary greeters at your entrances and lobbies formalize the process of introduction. Welcome. Here's what we've got. Thank you so much for coming. Here's our program. And talk to them a little bit and see what's going on. A greeter meets the newcomer because that's the greeter's job. That's why he's at the door. He's greeting them, welcoming them in. But greeters are stationed at entrances to look for and recognize new people. That's what they're there. You're here so that when new people come through the door, we want you to talk to them. And so everybody's going, yeah, I can do that. At stagnant and declining churches, greeters think their job is to welcome members. In growing churches, greeters know that there's an introduction to themselves to newcomers, and to help these guests become family. That it's one of those things, and like Bill said, that we've been asked to go to a couple different churches to see kind of how they work it. I went to a couple New Life churches, and they've got it down. They have got it down. Um, I went to the one over in Overland Park, and that pastor was out there at the door greeting everybody as they came in with his team there, and it was just it it was a welcoming thing that they have people two or three places as you going in, so you didn't hit the sanctuary until you were greeted at least three times, and that's the way it is, and you're going, man, that feels good to be acknowledged as you're walking through the door and as you're going into the sanctuary. So that is part of what the greetings are to everybody. Make that new person feel welcome. Make that member feel welcome. The greeter's job is to invite newcomers in, to welcome them in. Without an organized system of greeters, it's very hard for the church to break that 70 mark. That you need to have people there who are looking out and watching this. And pastor, you're not going to be the guy that does it all the time, because you got other things going on Sunday morning. You may have somebody in your ear talking to you. You just are not going to be able to see everybody come through the door. You need a reliable staff to be able to help you. And it may be everybody in your church. All four people today, they're going to be there. So in all churches, everyone should be a greeter. Then they have introducers. Introducers. Now this is, I think, something that is new. It may be new to us here, because I don't think anybody here has an introducer. But this is an important part. yeah, we got plenty of enforcers, but not an introducer. Yeah, but introducers, they're even better than greeters are. That as an introducer reaches out to newcomers and helps them meet others, they don't try to really be that person that they connect with, that they associate with for a long term. If I'm saying this right, their conversation always includes, you should meet so and so. They meet the person, they talk to them, they welcome them in, they find out some of their interests, why they're there, if they have kids, what's going on with that, and then they introduce them into a group that they assimilate with, that they can be brought into, that they can feel comfortable with. So that's what the introducer's role is to make that connection from the door to another person. Here, let me introduce you to brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so. Their family, they have kids about the same size or same age you do. Let's go over and let's talk to them. Or whatever that connection is, that's what the introducer finds and introduces and makes that bridge from greeting to connection in their church. Greeters are necessarily in all growing churches, but to break the 200 barrier, a church must have at least one introducer. And that's something there. An introducer intentionally introduces people to each other. They don't focus on making friends. Their focus is on connecting others. So you need somebody that introduces. If we want to grow, that builds the teams, that builds the group.
Okay, going back to greeters a little bit, you also got to remember, don't be pushy. Because there are some people that come in are very, very quiet. They're very, not, I don't want to say standoffish, but they're intimidated by new people. And you just need to not go too far and push them into like, well, you guys, you need to meet, stuff like that. Because they might be at the point where that might turn them completely off and say, okay, they went overboard. I don't feel comfortable feel like I'm being pushed to meet other people.
Yeah.
Because that has happened to me, because it's just like, you don't, in workplaces, it's like, okay, you get overwhelmed, and then you just go like, do I really want to go back?
Yeah.
Because you're overwhelmed. So you have to be careful to watch that.
Right. It has to be in moderation, right. is what that is. And the greeter and the introducer have to be sensitive to kind of what's going on and kind of read the people, how they're responding to their interaction, and to be able to do that. So finding what. Mm-hmm.
So an introducer would be like a network.
Yeah. Yeah. And the network. Yeah. The networker, also what they do, not only do they connect it, but they know the groups that are out here. They know the groups that are in your church to be able to connect them with somebody that they would be able to associate with, that we connect with, and not just throw them at the first person that comes along and puts them in the box. So, and finding an introducer, that's a job. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send forth introducers into the fields. We need people that help us make connections. And some people are so good at that, and some people need to work on it. I am a guy that needs to work on it. And so we need to work on that. And there is a rule of 7 out there that we are only 7 degrees of separation away from every other person on the planet. I don't know if you heard about Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. He brings this up, and he talks about it, and that he verifies that on average, every person in the world is only 7 relationships away from every other person. Now, if you stop and think about that, that's kind of amazing. Of if we really tried and we really kind of pressed on the points and the contacts, how fast we could get information out or get the message through it. That is, if you knew the right people to call, and they knew the right people to call, and they knew the right people to call, you could reach any person on the planet within 7 calls. Now that's something else to get that going. The interesting thing Gladwell discovered was that while we are all only 7 relationships away from anyone else, those 7 relationships were not all equal. It's if you drew a diagram that the people pathways that connect 100 men and women to famous celebrities, you would find that a large number, maybe as many as half the connections, went through one person. So somewhere down the line, maybe who you know as your second person or third person may be my 6th or 7th person. I mean, there's a connector there that everybody goes to. A lot of people go to because they're the person in the know. They're the ones who know everybody. They're the ones that have all the connections. And Gladwell calls this person the connector. Think about it. If half the connections of a famous celebrity run through one person, that means it's less than 7 connections that we have. 7 steps away. Anyway, next step, doing without an introducer. Assuming God hasn't sent you an introducer, yet what can you do until He does? What steps can you take if God hasn't laid an introducer at your feet and said, here, use him to see what's going on? Number 1 is overload your lobby with greeters of all ages, stages, and genders. And I got to thinking about this, and a lot of times we like to use the seasoned people as greeters because we can trust them. We know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And it brings a good front up that we've got the right people in the right spots. But it's here it's saying, go ahead and put some young people out there. Go ahead and put some different people out there. If nothing else, let them watch and let them see. And there will come a time when they will be there, when we have some young people come in that they will be able to relate with, that the older ones can't. So load your lobby up. Get people out there. Get the different ages. Have a variety of people out there. Empower all your people to become mini connectors. Everybody should have the ability and the blessing, if they know of a special need or a special request or a special talent that somebody new has, connect them with that. Oh, you're in the band? Let me go introduce you to our worship leader or our band director or the person that plays the piano. Let's get these connections made. Let's not go and wait and, hey, pastor, you need to go talk to this guy because I think he can help us here. We need to have that ability and that desire and the heart to grow our church to where we want to be one of those connectors in helping people make a connection and stay. Does your church have any introducers, any potential introducers in your church? As your mind goes through your people, do you have anybody that is the connector for your local church? Getting larger requires adjustment. And do we want to make that adjustment? We want the numbers. We want the numbers to come. We want the increase to come. But are we willing, or do we have the capability and understanding of moving forward and to making those adjustments? By the time a church passes 100, it will be a group of groups. That no longer will it be a small family. It will be a group of small families, a group of different groups. Because everybody has to have that connection, and it's so hard at 100 to be able to connect with everybody in the congregation, everybody in the church. That's why we need to have these small groups. If you don't have small groups, you're missing something. No matter what the size of your church, that small groups are important to make that connection and to have in place so that when somebody comes through the door, hey, by the way, our band is playing here every Tuesday night. Come on down, bring your horn down, let's go. Or whatever it may be. Since everyone can't keep track of everything else anymore, groups naturally emerge from different types of people with different types of interest. Couples groups, parents groups, it doesn't matter. If you can think of it, there's probably some people out there that can fill that group. We need to be building ministry teams. For churches under 200, the best way to organize new groups is to concentrate on building new and bigger and better ministry teams. We like that word. We like that ministry teams word. That seems impactful. But it has to be able to have substance to it also in what we do, so that we will be able to associate these with people. Each of these teams need a leader. And that's where kind of maybe our hesitation is. We keep saying we don't have enough leaders to fill these groups. But let's work on that. On-the-job training with the support of the pastor, moving into these areas can really be beneficial in the growth of that individual into leadership. It will take a load off your shoulders as a pastor, plus it will help anybody in that group to work together and feel that group, that family feeling that there is. And here's something interesting. I even marked it when I was sitting in a class like you guys are. Women bond through conversation. I don't, which is, that's part of it. But women bond through conversation, but men generally bond around action, playing together or serving together. So that kind of maybe puts an outline on how some of your ministry teams are structured, are formed. What is your audience for these teams? What are you looking at to meeting? What needs are you looking to meet? If you're looking at to meeting some of the needs of younger women, then it's not going to be out playing softball. It's probably going to be some kind of conversational work. And then I'm not saying they can't play softball. I've seen some that could rack that ball pretty good, but for the most part, women bond through conversation and men bond through activities. And as a church reaches around 125, which is double that 70 barrier, your style of leadership probably needs to change with that too. You cannot manage the same way. To grow from here, you'll need at least one or two associate pastors, whatever you want to call them, lay ministers, to help you carry the load and to work and to ministry and to be able to go out and be those folks that are shaking hands and seeing people, because your time is going to be so scheduled up that you'll need to have somebody help you, even if it's part-time. Have somebody there helping you. Building your staff. Building staff is an application of the team leadership principle number 5. The church pastor, planting pastor, is the most effective as not being the only guy on the team, but being the visionary of that team, directing the group into the vision that he has and the way the church is moving forward. It's like Bill's saying, you have to share that vision. You have to have people that come in with buy-in on this vision and have you help move it forward. And then you can, as they're moving forward, you can direct where that goes and kind of make a few adjustments as they're going by. As a leader, that you can do the very same thing as your leadership is formed in this team, that you can press forward, that you can have this vision, and that you can have people helping you move this vision forward. Often in a church stands on three legs. The three legs that the church stands on is worship, teaching, and children's church. These are the three basics that every church has. If you go anywhere, everywhere, it's always these three that the church stands on, and then they expand from there. Worship, teaching, and children's ministry. In most churches, a pastor covers the teaching. We know that's true. So the first three, to your first three employees, it talks about employees, but as we say employees, we can also talk about volunteers, because we don't have churches big enough to have full-time staffs that we hire everybody in place. We are very, very dependent on the volunteer staff that we have. So as we look forward, some of your first volunteers might be some people to help with the worship leading, help with the children's ministry oversight, or help with clerical or office work if you're not that person that does clerical work very well, which you hire, and in order is up to you. How you fill these positions is up to you, but it's critical that you work on these things to be able to take the load off of you in these areas, that you can do what you have to do, either as a pastor or a leader, to move forward with that. Reaching 200. These numbers may depend or vary depending on kind of where you're at and the culture of what's going on. Under the 200, until the church reaches 200, the pastor ought to spend 1/3 to 1/2 his time in new member recruitment. And I have seen our pastor do that extremely, extremely well. That Scott is our pastor, and he spends a lot of time in building relationships in the community, working out. Him and his wife are very community minded, and it has paid dividends, and families have come in, and it works. It is something, and as the church gets bigger, then that time is kind of shifted, and others need to fill that. Spend time cultivating relationships with unchurched people and inviting them to church. Ideally, the pastor's emphasis on new member recruitment should never cease. The pastor must be training others to do this job. Pastor, you're a good outreach person. Leader, you're a good outreach person, but you can't meet everybody. You can't be all places at all times. We fail drastically in our mentorship and our training of our leaders, that we need to spend time with them, and we need to understand how valuable they are to your ministry, to my ministry, because we can't do everything. We as leaders, we cannot do everything, and as the more we train, the more resources we have, the more contacts we can make, the more people we can bring in and meet and get that going. And here's that rule that Bill mentioned, that Picardio principle, that 80-20 rule, where 80% of the people or 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And that's true. That is absolutely true in work and everything else. They have found this to be one of those things. 80% of the effect come from 20% of the causes, is kind of what it was. And we need to be, as an example, to get that more balanced off. It would be nice it was 50-50. That would be wonderful. That half the people would be engaged to do what the work is and really get some production going here. But this proportion seems to be almost universal, and that's why they called it this principle. Discern who the 20% in your church is. As a leader, who are your top 20 performers? Who are the ones that every time you say, I've got this to do, they're right there in front of you? Who are they? Identify them and work with them. Get them going. Challenge more people to get involved, whether it's tithing, whether it's giving in offerings, and then expect 20% of them to actually accept the challenge. So you're presenting this to the whole church, And then don't get discouraged when only 20% of them get a response to you. But we need to work on that. They will increase significantly as we go. Leadership development is another point here. In order to reach and care for 200 active church participants, here's what you're going to need. Here's what the DCPI is looking at as a rule of thumb. It's not going to work every time. It's not going to work for every church. But this is that 80-20 structure that they're talking about here to be able to move forward instead of standing back and waiting for us to hit a different mark on that percentage. You need 40 leaders, which you'll have 160 followers being cared for by 40 leaders. That's at 80-20. And for every 40 leaders, you will need 10 leaders of leaders, if that makes sense. And then for every 10 of those leaders of leaders, you will need at least 2 leaders of leaders, which more than likely you're going to be one of those 2. So it still boils down to you, but there's a lot of work, a lot of effort going on below what you have. Your leadership structure will not grow exactly like this, but knowing the theory will help you identify where you're lacking on your structure, on your organization, on your administration. So look at your church right now. See what your organizational structure looks like. What your ministry teams look like. How many are on there? How far removed are you from them? How many people do you have? And all these things you need to look at and write it down on a piece of paper. Unless you're a whole lot smarter than I am and can do it in your head. But write it down on a piece of paper to get that schematic, get that idea, plan of this is where we're at. This is the teams we have in place or the teams we'd like to put in place. Let's get organized here. How are we going to put our administrative staff in a position, in the right place, to be able to make this thing work and make this thing grow? Small groups is another one. That's a very important part because small groups help people identify and they keep contact with them as your church grows. Once a church tops 200, its expansion requires small groups. And I don't want to sound mean or anything, but it seems like we've gotten away from small groups in what we're doing. That I don't know an answer as to why. I don't know a reason as to why. But we need to get back into that small group organizational, because that's where connections are made. We are not going to make connections in the sanctuary all the time. We're going to make connections out someplace else in these small groups. We're going to be able to really work close and hard with them on these small groups. That assuming each group averages 8 to 10 people, the church of 200 should have about 20 small groups. Small groups are vital for assimilation and discipleship. That the pastor they're not going to get everything they need out of the morning sermon. And in talking with different people, some of them from the New Life Church, some of them from another church I went to, what they do is they have small groups, but what they do is they get an outline of what the pastor's message was that Sunday. Yeah, an outline? What's an outline? What they do is they get an outline of the message, of the sermon the pastor has preached, and then they break it down even further in their small group meeting during that week. They sit there and they talk about it. The leader is a facilitator to bring up, okay, here's what the pastor mentioned. Here's the scriptures that he used. Here's what he was talking about. Any questions? Here's how it's applied to us. And that way that you get a more interaction, you get more discipleship going on, and you're going along with the same theme, the same thought, same principles that the pastor's preaching on that Sunday. So that might be something, if you want to try to work small groups, that might be a good start, is to be able to review. This is not to critique or criticize the pastor. This is to delve deeper into the word that he has preached and the thoughts and the principles that he's talking on, to be able to help them understand more.
So at one time, when the church got property, was there an emphasis on small groups?
Yes, years back there is what they called the CPMA. Oh, no, band service. Yeah, ABM, that's what it was. Assembly band movement, yeah. To where each church, like in Olathe, we had maybe 6 groups, and they were broken down roughly by age groups. And so they had a leader of each group, and each group probably had 8 or 10 people in it, like it's saying here. And it just kind of eventually went away. And nothing filled the spot. Nothing filled the spot. So it's important to have these small groups. DCPI brings it out very well to make that connection, to assimilate them into what we teach, disciple them, and answer their questions on a one-on-one basis instead of that.
Sometimes, well, we do a devotion every week first, and then the message. And a lot of times, if I'm not preaching, Larry's preaching, and I do the devotion, and then I know what he's preaching, I'll do the devotion on that. And we'll break it down even further for people to understand with the devotion and then the message as well.
Mm-hmm. But they need a time to where they can sit and ask and talk and work that way. So small groups are important. They're very important to a church. If you grow, like it says here, you're going to have small groups to be able to bring people in and to mentor them and disciple them. So the next one is a single cell church, a church where everybody can know everything. And we all started at that one point somewhere in our church lifetime. While the number of 70 is the average people, there's another sociological around 200. That's a barrier that is up there. That up to 200, everybody's talking like, well, I can kind of keep track of what's going on in church and seeing what's going on here about the news. After that, people start saying things like, I don't know what's going on here anymore. I have no idea who that is sitting over there. And so that's where this comes in, is that a church with everyone can know everything is called a single-celled church. And it doesn't, I was going to say, I think size, there's a lot of times where I don't know what's going on. I travel a lot, but there's some times that I don't know what's going on, and maybe that's just me. But because we value knowing and being known, many churches find it challenging to break that 200 barrier, because we get to that point where if we don't feel like we're in the know, then we're not going to keep coming. We're not going to keep attending, because we want to feel like people know us, we know what's going on, we're included in the group. So the 200 barrier is usually a sociological phenomenon rather than an exact number, so it could vary anywhere between 180 and 280. So it kind of is a rolling scale. Next one is strategies for breaking 200. And some of us now are going like, I'd just be happy to have 50, 70, 100. And so, but you always have to be looking ahead. You have to be planning ahead. That it's like they said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You always have to have a game plan in place. We must be purposeful to grow. We have to have a plan to grow, or we are not going to grow. We can't be satisfied where we're at. We can't look back and say, I wish it was like that now. We have to be looking forward and be purposeful in our position. The easiest way to break 200 barrier is to break it on your opening day. This is talking about a brand new church. And there again, some churches do this. When that first Sunday comes after they plant a church, they have 200 plus people. And that's the easy way to do it. Most, however, start small and need to strategize to grow. And I think that's probably where we fit in this category, is that we, in our position now, we need to strategize to grow. As a business, they strategize on how can we infiltrate the market? How can we draw more customers from the market? How can we get our product into the market? That's kind of some of the thinking that we need to have. And, to be wise as serpents, to be wise as the world is, when they do their business, man, they go all in. They look, they don't sit back and say, man, I hope this project works. Before they put money into it, they study the community. They study what they have. Where is the need at? Who has the need? How do we direct our marketing toward that group of people? And that's the same way we need to be at the church, is that we need to strategize how to grow. Where is our niche? What niche can we fit in? And it's not by tearing down the other churches in the area. That is not a niche. That is not going to get us to grow by tearing down the other churches. Think creatively about how we can break the next barrier, whether it's 50, whether it's 100, whether it's 200. Adding a second service sometimes will help. And that's what a lot of these bigger churches do is when a meeting room is uncomfortably full, it's difficult for newcomers to come in and find a space and feel comfortable sitting amongst the people there. That they don't want to have to struggle. They don't want to have to sit on the front row. Because, Church of God folks, they fill it from the back up. That's just the way we do it. And so we have all the front seats for the visitors. So, but that is not something that I like doing when I go to a church. I don't like to be, there's a seat, second row. Don't want to do that. So some of the churches will add a second service to be able to open up the seating for them. And here's that room capacity. It's one caution is a crowd often attracts a crowd. They say, well, if we have a lot of people, they'll be there. So if newcomers walk into an empty room, their first impression is negative. Like, what's going on here? And they often won't return no matter how good the service is. There are 4 levels of fullness in your service, in your congregation. Uncomfortably empty. That means there's less than 40% of your seats are full. They come in and they're wondering like, okay. Comfortably empty is 40 to 60% full. There's still a good number there, but there's still a good number that be able to sit. Comfortably full is 60 to 80% full. Getting a little more people in there, but there's still a good number of seats available to come in. Or uncomfortably full is over 80%. And I don't know, Bill or Joe might be able to help on this, but I heard it was about 70% is going to be where you're going to probably level off on your capacity. It's saying 80% here. I heard some of them saying a little bit lower, because once you hit that level, then that seems to be the number where you need to start looking at doing something different, whether it's 2 services, whether it's expanding, whatever it may be. But, if somebody comes in and it is very full, uncomfortably full, then we need to take a look at that. When we add a second or third or fourth service, ask volunteers to attend both services. They need to be in service too. And so that's going to be kind of another thing that we're going to have to add. Adding more ministries. Another way to increase attendance is to increase the number of ministries. And I don't want to keep referring back to New Life, but they've got this thing down. And I went to 2 different ones, and I was really impressed on how they do it. They have their service, but then they've got, I don't know how many different ministries to meet the needs. They have children's ministry there, but then they have a wall full of ministries that you can go over to and look and see what kind of interests were going on. And I took my son and my daughter, my youngest son and his wife, and we went to one of the New Life churches over in Lenexa, and they liked it there. And what their first thought is what group can we get involved with to get them going? And they don't usually, I've been trying to find them a church. They don't go to church right now. And so their first thing is, I want to have some friends. What group can we get involved with? And so that's what's important, is that they may not come up to you and ask you, hey, what kind of group do you have? But they may come up and attend the service and look around, and do we announce what kind of groups we have? Do we have posted what kind of groups we have to be able to help those people attending our church? And that made an impact on me. It made an impact on them to where they are looking at that pretty hard in being part of that group. So if you add, some of us have choirs, some of us that don't have choirs. The bigger church do. That's some of it. Some of the sub-ministries that we can add as we move forward is the choir, youth group, men's group, women's group, singles group, children's group, I know that there's some special interest groups that my oldest son, he has a special needs boy, my grandson is, and so they were looking for a church with a special needs group. And that, a lot of churches don't have that group involved, but they found a Nazarene church that does. And so they are ministering to them and they're getting involved in that church. I'm not saying we all need a special needs group, but we all need to look and see what needs are out there. The church is to meet needs. The church is to serve the needs of those around us. But if we don't know, like Bill says, if we don't know what they are, if we don't get a feel of the community, if we don't get a feel of who's coming in the door, how are we going to know how to serve and to meet that need? And so that's where some of these groups can come in and work in that way. How churches grow. Contrary to what you might think, churches usually don't grow steadily. It's not a constant uphill going. That they usually grow in surges and then consolidate. So like on a big Easter Sunday, have 200 people here. Not all those 200 people are going to come back the next Sunday. Some may, and it kind of gets the bell curve going and moves down. But then as those that continue to come, it actually raises your number of people there, and then they assimilate, they get introduced, they get enveloped into the normal function of the church, and then we have that kind of continuing on, and then the next one goes up, and we're continually on an uphill climb, hopefully, but it's going up and then coming back down, going up and coming back down. So certain seasons of the year lend themselves for growth. We know that. We take a full advantage of that in all our services. In the American culture, people tend to think about trying new or different things in September when the children go back to school, or first of the year when January's New Year's, the resolutions and all this stuff going on. So those are some things that we could maybe emphasize on. Will we keep everybody? No, but we may get some. We may get some. Promote special days. Invite, different speakers to come. Invite them to come out, and whether it's a sports person, whether it's a testimony, because the other day I seen, I don't know if you know Josh Hawley, the senator over in Missouri. He spoke at a big conference, and I don't know anything about the man at all, but he was speaking, to a Christian conference, and he was saying some pretty good stuff. Like, do we want to go off that and invite him into one of our churches? I don't know. Talk to him, see what he said. But, stuff like that where people that are easily recognizable to come in and just speak or encourage, and that might help work on. Some churches give a free gift, have something available for all your visitors, or have it available for somebody that invites a guest and going on. So, but big days can help us break these barriers sometimes. And as the church grows in size, the expectations of the members change. As you grow, there is going to be different expectations placed on the pastor that you are going to have and that the pastor is going to have to fill. In smaller churches, everyone expects the pastor as a friend. They're their buddy. Everybody knows them, ins and outs and everything. In a larger church, everyone expects quality in all aspects of the service, including the parking, greeting, nursery, children's ministry, music, youth services, and especially the preaching. It better start improving as we get bigger. And then very big churches, people expect a variety of excellent services tailored to meet their needs. College programs, mission trips, mercy trips, recovery ministries, and programs geared toward their particular age and lifestyle. So the expectations get higher and higher as the church gets bigger and bigger on these things. And issues that as your church continues to grow. And hopefully, as we grow, we face some of these issues because it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And as a church grows, it must continue to add new small groups. We've talked about that. But now the necessity of smaller sub-ministries might need to be filled also, to where it's very specific on what these people are doing, what these groups are addressing. And I think that's where some of these recovery ministries and different things like that are particularly pointed at a very specific group to get that going. And it's talking about hiring here. And we talk about hiring, but we understand that, we have volunteers. But even with volunteers, and we have found this out kind of the hard way, is that every job needs a job description, regardless of whether it's a volunteer position or a hired position. We at one time hired a youth director. Didn't have a job description, just kind of told him roughly what we wanted to do. And things went south fairly shortly after that he didn't feel like certain things were in his requirements for being in that position. And so he had a couple heart-to-hearts, didn't do it. He said, you guys had never told me this. You didn't let me know what my job was completely, if this is part of it or not. You didn't tell me this, so I'm not going to do it. And so eventually he was let go. Yes, he was out. And so that is the importance of having a job description, even if it is a volunteer situation. Is that going to be an issue? It's going to take some work. And it does, it's going to save you down the line in what's going on. An essential ministry skill is hiring. The pastors a lot of times fall into that category of hiring somebody because they are the decision maker. They're the executive officer of the church. So, but get you a committee. Rely on that. Rely on some of the people in your community that may know the individual. Talk to them, work with them. And it's said that sometimes the best hires come from internally. Well, that's kind of a yes and a no. Internal hires, they're proven leaders. You know them. They know the vision. They know the mission of the church. They know where you're wanting to go with the church. And they're already supporting you as a senior pastor. So that would be an easy pick. Somebody within your church to being able to move it. The downside is don't sacrifice competence for closeness. Just because you know the guy doesn't mean he can fulfill the job and do the tasks that you need that position to do. And so buddy is not always going to be the best selection, best choice that we have going. And finally, disappointed leaders, if they don't get what they want and they move on to something else, more than likely they will take some of your people with them. They will take some of the group with them, and that's part of the downside of hiring internally. So look at the 3 dimensions of leadership and one extra component. The DCPI Planning Essentials, where we emphasize the 3 dimensions of leadership. 3 dimensions of leadership: personality, ability, and maturity. You need all 3. I've seen people with personality, I've seen people with ability, but they have been immature and not able to handle the criticism, the pressure, different things going on with that. And so, and same thing, you can have somebody that's really mature, and man, they got a good personality, but they just don't have the skill set to do the job. So it takes that, those 3 are essential that when you're looking for that. In addition to these, when hiring, look at chemistry. Do you get along with the individual? How do they fit into the staffing of your current group that you have in place? If they always poke the bear, is it going to be a good thing to have them in the middle of all this? Stir the pot. See what happens. That's not a good theory to have. So look at that. Is a potential staff member going to be adding to what you have already started to build and working for? There will be friction if you get somebody in there that doesn't go with the chemistry. Before hiring someone, answer the following question. And just answer this right now. And you can pick somebody out in your congregation. If this does not work out, how will I fire or remove them or let them go if it becomes necessary? I hire somebody within the church, within our local church, and now they're not doing the work. How am I going to be able to approach them and tell them, Sorry, but your services are no longer needed. That's going to be a tough question. If you can't answer that, don't hire them. If you cannot answer that honestly of how the worst part would be, don't hire them. We're not suggesting that you don't work with people to help them succeed in their roles. But what we want to do is sometimes you need further mentoring. You don't want to put somebody in a leadership role that's difficult for them. Set them up to fail. You don't want to do that. You want to develop them. You want them to where when you finally make that appointment into a leadership position, that they stand tall and they support you as the pastor, or they support you as the leader that is over them, and they move forward discipling people, bringing souls to Christ. After hiring, it's essential to have regular conversations and reviews. You got to talk to your people. That's part of the organizational administration part. You got to talk to them. When I was working for the sheriff's office, that I had meetings about every week with my folks, trying to find out not just what's going on, but how are they doing? How are you doing? How's the family doing? What's going on in your personal life that could affect what you're doing here? Because it will affect it. If your leaders are having problems outside of the organizational part of the church, it will come in and affect you. Have an idea, get a feel of what's going on, that you can help them and work with them and develop them and keep them on the right track, so that doesn't impact them. And all you're seeing is that they're starting to fall off on their job here working in the church, but you're seeing the whole picture, and you're there to nourish, to mentor them and work with them. So, loyalty to the senior pastor is vitally important. Unless they do something that is way off base. Way off base, yeah. The day of the staff member decides that they can't follow the senior pastor's leadership is the day they need to step aside. Because that will be nothing but trouble. And I hope that both sides would be able to understand Ephesians 4:3 says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That's important. The value of a mentor. We talked about this earlier, the Barnabas principle. Barnabas principle is that everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs somebody to talk to. Everybody needs somebody to go to. Like I said, I've got a couple guys that I could go to, and I appreciate them for what they do. They're pretty straight shooters, and that's what you want. You don't want somebody to fluff you, because it doesn't help any. You want guys that shoot you straight and tell you what's going on. You will always need a mentor. No matter how old you get, no matter what position you're at, no matter what you're doing, you're always going to need a mentor. Always need that somebody looking from the outside in to help you figure out things. As the church grows, you may need a different kind of mentor. Somebody that has already walked the path that you are about to walk would be the ideal person to get a hold of and to talk to. Somebody that has grown larger churches, that has pastored larger churches, that has dealt with some of the problems that you are dealing with now. Look for those people. We have pastors here that have experience that could help us in everything that we've done. There's probably very few things that the pastors in this district haven't faced. One or two of them haven't faced at some point that you can reflect on and that you can sit and talk with them. And think double. Think double. One way to ensure you're always planning for more is to think double. Whatever you have now, double it. Let's think double. Here's some questions that I want to ask you. If you double your numbers of newcomers, how would your system need to change? How would your structure change? How would your organization change? How would your church look if you had twice as many visitors come in this Sunday as you've had before? What would you need to double your numbers of small groups? What small groups would you add? How would you meet the needs of these people coming in if they were to double? What would you need to do to double your number of worship leaders and children's workers? Here is the thing, that when we don't have children, we need to have people ready to have the children's ministry working. because we don't know who's coming in that door this Sunday, but we need to have somebody prepared to teach them the Word of God and not just wing it. That is not part of Joseph's planning. He's the structure, the organization, the administration. Have somebody ready so that when that doubling comes, and it may come quickly, to be able to have that. If you double now, how many seats would you need? Do you have plenty of seating? Should your church double itself by multiplying daughter churches? Are you at the point where you can reach out and help some other church or plant another church in what's going on before us? These are questions to pray about, to think about, and sit down with your leadership team. We don't expect the pastors to take this all upon themselves. Sit down with your leadership team and brainstorm. Come up with stuff. See what we can do. And then there'll be a shift in the ministry. The smaller the church, the greater proportion of ministry is done by the pastor. Would you agree? The larger the church, the larger the proportion of ministry is done by the pastor. That's not right, but that seems that way sometimes. But the larger the church, the larger proportion of ministry is done by staff and volunteers. That Joseph was not able to micromanage that group of people he had working for them as they were building, as they were collecting the grain, as they were distributing the grain. He had to trust his leaders to be able to do that. He had the administrative part. He had the part where he answered to Pharaoh. And he had his people down controlling and managing here. When you get bigger, when you grow, not if you grow, but when you grow, you're going to have to give up some of your responsibilities to leaders that you have developed, that you have trained, that you have grown to help you in this ministry. So, and there is some reflections on that. I'll let you look that over by yourself. But all these things, all those questions there are good questions to probably ask as you're doing your implementation plan, to be able to, where are we at now? What do we need to address, and how are we going to do it? Because that, you write it down and you will be amazed at how much clearer that vision for the future will be when you work on that implementation plan. And that's all we have for number 5. Thank you.